Hi guys, in this video I'm going to do a follow-up to my review of the DJI Focus Pro, and in this case I have it mounted on the DJI RS4 Gimbal, so I'll show you how it works with that, plus I'll just kind of go over some of the features I didn't have time to go over in my main review of the follow focus, and I'm also going to answer all your questions that you guys left on my review of it. So first let me kind of jump in and kind of talk about this is the side grip, in case, again, if you guys haven't seen my full review of it, and I'll provide the links in the description. The side grip, as you can see, very similar to the hand unit. There is a difference, and the biggest difference I would say is that, like in terms of actual functionality, I mean, obviously the design is different. Again, watch my full review to see the differences between the actual design of it. But when it comes to functionality, yes, the hand unit, you can set the A and B points. In the side grip, you can't as of right now. Now I don't see why DJI wouldn't be able to implement that into the side grip. It seems like just a software kind of thing, upgrade. So I'm hoping that they're listening, because I know there's a lot of people kind of complaining about it. I mean, for me, because I have the hand unit, it's not as big of an issue, but no, it would be nice sometimes to have it so that even when I'm like single operating it and being able to then turn this, but still have like these sort of hard stops where I know it's not going to go past the point A or B. So that would be a nice feature to have. Now, if you're wondering about the differences between basically the RS4 gimbal and this, well, it's almost identical. I mean, even if you look at it, it has, the ring, the dial ring here is the same. It has the same button here, the trigger button. And then also here in the back, obviously you have the screen. So you have a screen in your side grip that comes with the Focus Pro, and then you have it here in the gimbal. So if you're going to pair it up with this gimbal, then pretty much the grip of the gimbal acts and does exactly the same things that the actual side grip of the full DJI Focus Pro kit does. So you'll be able to control this. Either you can control the zoom or the focus, obviously. Now, for example, if you're in autofocus or AMF, even better, then you can use the trigger again to lock onto the different subjects. And also in autofocus, you'll be able to use this then to switch between the different faces that it recognizes. So that's a really nice feature, to just be able to have all that in the gimbal. Now again, just like with the side grip, you can't, or at least I haven't been able yet to find, as of right now, a way to set A and B points with the gimbal here or with the side grip. So just be aware of that. So for that, then you would still need to have, I guess, another person operating with the hand unit. Now, in case you're not aware, when you pair up the DJI Focus Pro unit with the DJI RS4 gimbal, and I think it's the same with the RS3, is that because the LiDAR actually has an RGB camera, that means that basically when you connect it here to the gimbal, you'll be able to actually view a live feed of what the camera sees. And since that little screen on the back, again, acts the same way as the screen on the side grip, it allows you the full functionality. You can touch to focus certain areas, all of that stuff. But because you're obviously on a gimbal, you can also use the LiDAR camera, essentially, to enable the active track without having to use a phone or some other third-party way of doing it. So it's really nice because you can essentially set this to be, like, let's say if you're a one-man crew, you want to get some B-roll of yourself, well, you can do that. And this will make sure that you're always staying in frame. Now, something to be aware of, though, is it's not as hands-off, or for example, doesn't function, I would say, as well as the, for example, DJI Osmo Pocket 3 camera, because you're still using different lenses. So certain lenses, especially spherical lenses, work a lot better. But when I'm using, for example, like this 50mm anamorphic lens, I mean, this thing will still follow because it doesn't essentially use this lens, but the framing is so much different in the camera. So this, basically, if you're using these lenses that are not, like this is kind of like a mid-range sort of a wide-angle lens that's built into the LiDAR. Well, if you're using anything, other than that, like let's say if you're using like a super wide lens or like a telephoto lens or anamorphic lenses, you're not always going to get the perfect framing. And what I mean by that is that the LiDAR will still follow your subject. So for example, in like these tests outside, when I'm kind of walking along, and in this case, I have the LiDAR following the subject here, and it's constantly focusing on the subject, and it's also driving the gimbal. So all I'm really doing is just walking with the gimbal, but I don't have to actually point the gimbal at my subject. And as you can see, for the most part, it does a good job, but there is going to be times when you're going to still have to go ahead and, with the joystick here on the back, adjust basically it's sort of a neutral position, because whenever you're going to change your distance, especially to the subject, like if you get closer, it's going to be, again, you got to remember that the LiDAR camera is not exactly, dead center of where your actual camera or the lens that you're recording internally into the camera. So because of the difference in distance, when you get closer, you're going to notice that the LiDAR is going to keep the subject in the middle, but this will be like way below. So you'll have to compensate by moving the camera up. So it's not going to be 100% hands off, is what I mean. Like if you wanted to use this to be sort of getting selfies, again, if you use like a mid-range lens and a spherical lens preferably, and you're not changing the distance from the camera too much, you kind of just like figure out where you are and then, turn on the active track, it's going to work well. But once you start going really far away, or then let's say suddenly you change and get really close, a lot of times the framing is going to be all off. Like I said, most of the time when you get really close, it's just going to cut off your head or part of your head. So that's, again, something to be aware of, that you still are going to have to go in and sort of adjust in the neutral position. And this does work well. It's easy. So for example, if I want to, if I'm tracking a person, let's say, or an object, and I want that to always be not in the dead center of the frame, but let's say to be off to the side or up or down, I can easily offset that, right? So in that sense, it works. But then once I set my position and then I change the distance drastically, it might suddenly not work as well, and you'll still have to go in there and adjust the position. Now in my tests, I've noticed that basically the closer you can get the LiDAR to the lens, so either have it like right on top here, and that kind of works. Like you can even literally take off the little stand that's there and you can tape it. It's, just when I was testing it, it works, but obviously it's not a solution you want to be using all the time, because you still want to keep it like horizontal, it has to be level. That's another thing to keep in mind. In case you're shooting vertical content and you're going to switch it here, which you can on this gimbal, so the camera is vertical, well, the LiDAR, you'll have to figure out a different way to mount it so it's still horizontal. Now, the best way, I think, is to actually mount it underneath it if you have the rails, or if you have both rails, for example, here, because I've seen already some people kind of creating their own rigs where they essentially remove this little stand that comes with the LiDAR, and then they attach it to the actual 50mm rods or the rails here. So, that would make it really good, because it would be like right underneath the camera, and kind of also do it so the front of that LiDAR lens lines up with the front of your actual lens. So that I think that would be best kind of setup. But for that, you're going to have to come up with your own kind of a solution. Like the best solutions that I've seen online people do is they basically produce their own, like a 3D printed mount for this that will fit on the rails. Now, does it mean that you can't use it the way I have it right now by having it on the hot shoe mount on my camera? No, you can, but like I said, when you're getting to these really extremes, like the subject gets really close or really far away, you're still going to have to go in there and adjust it. Now, that's another thing I wanted to say, actually, comparing to my review, because I was using this with the Z-Cam, and because of the way my Z-Cam was configured, I have a top handle, I don't have a hot shoe or cold shoe mount on the top, so I wasn't able to mount it directly over the lens, and I actually had it mounted to the cold shoe mount here on the side grip. So essentially the LiDAR was here. That also works, and like again, most of the time that will work, but then again, to be aware, when the subject was getting closer, well, the LiDAR is a little bit off to the left side, so in that case, the camera was actually pointing too much to the right. So in that case, again, you would have to just offset it. So, something like that to be aware of. I guess ideally, it would be best if you could somehow take the video feed from this camera that you're actually recording in, and then instead of feeding the camera that you see feed it to the whole Focus Pro system. I don't know if that's possible, but because again, the LiDAR itself, like the RGB camera wouldn't be, I guess, where this is, but I'm guessing it still relies on the LiDAR and the LiDAR is not there. So yeah, I'm not even sure if that would ever be possible, but that would be the best thing if literally you had a LiDAR built into the lens, right? Because then you're getting exactly the perspective and the point of view of the camera. So that's something to be aware of. And oh yeah, another thing is if you have some kind of obstructions, like when I a few times tried to use a matte box with this, yeah, it creates a problem, because especially if there's like a subject is down kind of lower here and a little closer, well, the matte box is going to completely block the view, so the LiDAR will not be able to see the subject that you're trying to focus on, or if you're using the active track also. So in that case, you would have to actually move it again and mount it onto your matte box somehow. And that could be another solution. Like let's say if you know you're always going to be using a matte box with your setup, then just create some kind of a mount that it attaches to the top of your actual matte box. Now the only problem with that is if you're not using cinema lenses, which have standardized basically size, then each time you're changing a lens, if the matte box moves forward or back, well then that changes the position of the LiDAR to your image plane, the sensor plane in your camera, and then that means that you gotta not only configure each lens, but each time you change the LiDAR, you'll have to reconfigure the LiDAR, and that is a little bit, it's not, I shouldn't say it's a pain, but it just takes time. You gotta have, measure the actual distance in millimeters from the front of the LiDAR to the image plane of your camera. And so preferably you just want to leave it on there and not change it, right? But if you're changing the position of the LiDAR, well, you're going to have to reconfigure it, and that just adds time to set up. Now, what do I think of it being used in a sort of a professional setting? I have not used this in any film production yet. All the work I've done, like over the last pretty much 2 years, has been as a special effects like supervisor and doing animation, visual effects. I did the last SpongeBob animated film for Netflix, like stuff like that. So, in there, because I'm working on post-production side, I don't actually even handle the cameras. So I haven't had a chance to use it, and I have not had a chance to work even on any like small film projects. So haven't really used it in a real environment. I can tell you though, from sort of doing my tests with it, I can see it be usable in a lot of these big film sets. But at the same time, I know some cinematographers or ACs might have an issue with the fact that you're relying essentially on a micro USB-C connections. I wish, or maybe DJI can do this, in a future upgrade. If they can still use USB-C, but come up with their own kind of a USB-C cable that has actual locking in there, like a little thumb screw or something. Or just use like LEMO connectors, right? Because you need something more robust. Again, me using it, sort of testing it around my house or doing different camera tests, I haven't had any issues. But if you're like in the middle, kind of running and gunning a big production and you're moving fast, I can see it being very easy to be able to snap off these USB-C cables. And if one of them breaks off and it's stuck inside there, well, then you're kind of screwed. That motor will be useless to you. So that's something that's a little bit worrisome. Now on the plus side, I guess you could say if you just simply damage the cable and it's not, that hasn't damaged the focus or the LiDAR, well then I guess it's easier to replace it than having to look for specialty cables like such as LEMO connectors. So there's a plus and minus, I guess. But yeah, in general, I would just say it would be good to have a more of a robust sort of a connection. Because again, USB-C is not something you want to rely on when you're in the middle of like a $50-60 million film production, and where every minute pretty much counts, and the whole crew and cast, everybody's waiting on you, and again, just because you have an issue with the USB cable, you cannot hold up the whole production. Overall, though, my impressions also of how it works with the gimbal, really good. Like I said, it's just, allows you the full functionality of basically having the grip, the side grip, but having it here on the gimbal. The active track, like I said, aside from those few limitations, it works really well too. So I do see it, being usable in some places. I did find though that like when subjects sometimes move too fast, and the active track will eventually like lose the person. So it's not something you always want to be relying on. But then again, if you're doing this, like using it on like a bigger production, then you're going to have multiple people working, and then you can just have somebody remotely operate the, where the gimbal is actually pointing at. But if you're, doing a sort of a small, low-budget production where it's just you operating the camera, focus, and everything, and you don't want to have to rely on always making sure you got the subject in frame, then yeah, again, like 80% of the time, I would say in my tests, I was able to just kind of walk around and not even have to look at my screen, and I know that the subject is in there, right? That the camera's pointing at it. Now, one little quirky thing I noticed is that the batteries that come with the DJI Focus Pro, they're actually, like, they have the exact same connection, and they look identical, like the same pins and locking mechanism as the battery for the RS4 or 3 gimbals. And so my first thought was, like one time when I ran out of batteries on my DJI Focus Pro, I thought, I'll just grab the battery from the Ronin gimbal. Well, it doesn't work. Not only that, but then good thing I realized, like, I was getting some weird message, then it would shut off. And then afterwards I was like, okay, I guess it doesn't work. And then afterwards I found online only that you actually shouldn't be using this, because there's actually a difference in voltage. So even though these battery grips look identical and the same connection, they are actually different voltage. And because of that, you could technically damage either the gimbal or the Focus Pro side grip if you're using the wrong battery on there. So that is something to be aware of. And again, I wished, that DJI maybe just, best thing would be if they actually created a new kind of a connection so that you couldn't even put the wrong battery in there. But I would say, I guess the only other solution right now is to basically, I guess, put like a sticker in there, and so that you know that this battery is only for the gimbal, this one is only for the Focus Pro side grip. So again, something to be aware of, just so that you don't by accident end up, burning and damaging your expensive equipment. All right, so now I'm going to answer your questions that you guys left on my initial review of the DJI Focus Pro. So first one is, for the DJI website does not mention the Focus Pro kit being compatible with the Zcam. Did you run into any compatibility issues? No, I mean, I haven't. Like, I have the camera actually here. The Zcam, this is the Zcam F6 Pro, great camera, and I haven't had any issues because I don't rely on the gimbal or the side grip here to actually control the camera. The camera works great. It has full touchscreen capability on the monitor, so I can control everything way faster and easier, I find, by just touching the touchscreen. So I don't ever, basically, I didn't need to remotely control the camera using the DJI Focus, whether it's the gimbal or the side grip here for the Focus Pro. But when it comes to, obviously, the focusing, yeah, it works, right? It's going to work with any manual lens. But when it comes to actual camera control, it's not going to work. As far as I know, it's because the DJI Focus Pro, I think it uses Bluetooth only to connect to cameras, or USB-C cables. Well, this doesn't have that. This is only Wi-Fi connectivity or Ethernet. And so because of that, it's just completely different systems. I don't even think they'll be able to add that functionality to control the Zcam. Another question here is, I'd love to see if you can get it to work with 135mm. I can't for the life of me. It works pretty well with my 50mm Siri anamorphic, but not with the Venus 135mm T2.9. DJI touts 20 meter range, but it's not really working well enough at half that to have it follow a person. Yeah, so I'll tell you this. I have used it with a 150mm lens, and I don't have the 135 right now, but I have had it work. But again, it's you got to be aware of then is, especially when you have like a longer lens, like when I was using it, not with this particular lens, but I had like a zoom lens that was almost as crazy long as this. Well, then you really do not want to have the LiDAR all the way back there where it might get, obscured by the front of the lens. So you really don't want to move the LiDAR to the front of your lens. So that's kind of how you can get around that issue, because otherwise it will sometimes, the LiDAR is gonna have problems because it's getting obscured, the vision. Another thing is, when you're tracking objects like really far away, like basically like more than I would say 30, 40 feet away from the camera, it's not as accurate. Like it can be accurate, but you're gonna have to then make sure that when you're configuring, when you're setting up, calibrating the LiDAR, that you get the distance between the front of the LiDAR and the image plane like dead on. You cannot be off by like 2 or 3 millimeters, because for most of it, even if you're off a little bit, it's still gonna work. But for like really far away, you have to really make sure that it's well calibrated. And then the same thing with the lens too. Make sure that you're calibrated, obviously, the lens properly. Thanks, Tom. We already missed seeing you here. I haven't gone anywhere, but unfortunately, the way YouTube is now and the algorithm, it basically makes no difference if you have 2 subscribers or 1 million subscribers. Like, they will just not notify the subscribers. That's just how the algorithm works. Hi, Tom. Any idea how to calibrate DJI Focus Pro on a zoom lens? Should you do for each focal range on the particular zoom lens? Many thanks. I've only tested this once with like a DZO lens that I have. That's a zoom lens, and I would say it's possible. It's possible to do it, but you're gonna have to be really, again, dead on and have some kind of like a really accurate way of marking your zoom positions, because once you change the zoom position and then let's say you calibrate it and save it as a preset in the DJI Focus Pro unit, and then later on, let's say you go back to that same focal, like there's the zoom, setting, the focal mark, and you're even off a little bit, it's not gonna work. Thank you for this review, but I'm curious what monitor you use. Oh, if you're talking about this was the camera I was using in the original review. That's the monitor that actually comes with the Zcam F6 Pro. And that's kind of like, I might do a video. I do want to do a video actually about this camera. It's a really good camera, just like the previous version was. And the Pro just makes it that much more pro. And one of the big things is this this monitor. This monitor is like, it's actually a pretty good quality screen, really responsive touch screen. And the mount, even like you can see here, that mounts the monitor. It works really well. Yeah, it's overall really good monitor, but again, this is only going to work with the Zcam because it has like a proprietary locking kind of a pin connection here that connects only to the Z cameras. Can you please review the PD Movie Air Smart? It's a lighter focus motor. Okay, I'll try to see if I can get my hands on it. That's always an issue. Great review, Tom, but you forgot to remove the small stickers, yellow markings on the. Oh yeah, the little. I mean, I put it now. I don't know if you see it. But basically, yeah, when I was doing the review, I mean, I just got it straight out of the box. I started testing it, and some of the footage that I was getting and I shot was early on, like pretty much on the first or second day that I was using this. So because of that, yeah, I didn't properly put the stickers and all that stuff. I did do it properly now, but thank you. Sorry if you answered this already, but can this unit be powered by VLAC? Yes, it can, because it's USB-C, right? So it connects to USB-C, but they also do give you. Let me get the box here. You can see they give you a USB-C to D-tap cable. So yes, you can use it. Something to be aware of, and it says it on the cable, is that this is 14 volts, right? So it says for DJI Focus Motor Pro use only. Do not use when the DJI Focus Pro motor is powered by an external power supply, such as the DJI Focus Pro grip. Otherwise, it may damage the power supply. So yes, you can use it, but I guess you cannot use it then in conjunction with the grip. You would have to, simply because the voltage is higher. So you would power this, and then you would use like the hand unit remotely. Now you could also have a workaround. I mean, I've seen a lot of these little things on B&H where will essentially allow you to take D-tap and then has a little distribution box that you can kind of zip tie somewhere to your rig, and that will then power and actually step down the voltage for different things, including, for example, like a USB-C. So you can actually have like a 5 or 6 volt basically connection for that using USB-C, but originally, I guess, being powered by the D-tap. So another good question here, is there any longer USB-C cable for the LiDAR or any way to make it longer? I've tried using some of my USB-C cables and they don't work. I haven't tested this out, and the ones that they provide you are always the same length. And yeah, like I know, like this one is like barely just long enough, and this is even, on the actual gimbal. But if I move this camera even further this way, I might have an issue connecting it. So then I might actually have to move this motor and, basically mount it on the other side. Yeah, I haven't actually tested out a lot of these USB-C cables. I don't see why, like there isn't anything really that special about these USB-C cables. So I would just say, just try different ones, because I know some can carry the voltage. This is 6.6 volt, and some simply are limited. So maybe that's what's causing some of the USB-C cables to not be able to power this. Another question, am I able to use the 1.25 adapter for my anamorphic lens with this? Yes, you can. Just like there was, like people were wondering about, like any other accessories you put in front. It will not change, like the adapter, basically it does not change the way the actual focus mechanism inside works. So obviously if you calibrated a lens without the adapter in front and then you throw that on there, yes, it's not going to be focusing in the same spot. So you'll just have to recalibrate that lens and basically tell it, how like whenever you set up a new lens on the DJI Focus Pro, like I showed in my original review of it, you have to sort of find like an object about like a meter away, focus on that, then you go 4 meters away and you focus on that, and then that's how it knows basically where it's focused by turning the focus ring. And so it doesn't matter what you put in front of it, it's still going to work as long as, again, you configure it or calibrate the lens with whatever you are also going to already put in front of your lens. So that's something to keep in mind. No A and B points with only the hand grip unit. Yes, that's what I just said at the beginning of this video. But anyways, yes, to answer your question. And then it says, on the hand grip unit, is it possible to reverse the focus wheel, aka switch right to left to focus near or further away? I don't know if you're asking whether you can physically move this. No, you can't. It's designed like that. But yes, you can change the direction of it, of this focus wheel, and the same thing for this dial on the hand grip. You can change the directions of these. So whichever way you prefer to have it, you can do that. And the same thing with the gimbal. If you want to change the direction of which way it focuses, you can also do that. Okay, another one. Good review. How does it compare to previous version? I had the previous version of the LiDAR and I was very frustrated with it. I had to recalibrate all the time, and this made it completely unusable in professional context. The theory is great, but it's miles away from internal stabilization of the Sony camera. I think you mean autofocus. Anyways, yeah, I did notice an improvement, but that's mainly, I think, because, again, it works almost very similar to the previous version if you're using it with the gimbal. If you're using it with the hand unit or the side grip, that's completely different suddenly, because you're not reliant on having this thing set up on your gimbal. So it can be, like a standalone camera rig. And so because of that, it's different. Now, again, it does not mean, kind of like I mentioned before, that you will not have to recalibrate it. Again, it's very easy. Double tap the little power button here on any of the motors, and it will quickly recalibrate the near far focus points, or if you're also controlling remotely the zoom or the iris ring. So that's one thing. And then also, like I said, whenever you're changing the position of the LiDAR on, relative to your camera, then again, you're going to have to update the distance of the front of the LiDAR to the image plane of your camera. So if you're not moving the LiDAR, then yes, you'll have to or I would say it's good practice to always recalibrate your lens, like the motors. But it's very quick. You just double tap on it. Should I get this even though all of my lenses have autofocus already? No, if you have autofocus lenses, and first of all, if you're happy with your camera's autofocus system, then I guess you don't need this, right? Because this is basically designed so that you can turn cinema or manual glass into sort of like autofocus lenses. So if you already have an autofocus lens, you don't need it. Not to mention that most autofocus lenses are going to be focused by wire, and then that means that this basically is just not going to work with that, because you need actual lenses that have hard stops on the focus ring. Does someone know how I have to set the Focus Pro in combination with SpeedBooster 0.71 and the Sigma 18-35? From my tests not with that particular lens, you don't have to do anything different. Again, once you put the SpeedBooster on and then the lens, you kind of treat that as your lens, like your setup. So now, if you configured that lens before and calibrated it, using the DJI Focus Pro, and you have it set as a preset, but without the booster, well, then you're going to have to sort of now recalibrate it, because now you have another piece of glass in front of it, essentially changing the optics of your lens. It's still going to work, don't get me wrong, because essentially the speed booster changes, changes the optics in your lens, right? Projects it on a slightly bigger image plane and all that stuff. It changes the optics of it, and also changes the distance of the the center of the lens focus to the image plane. So because all of that changes, you just have to recalibrate the lens or add it as a new lens. But once you do that, it's just the LiDAR doesn't know what lens you have in there. It doesn't know how the lens operates internally. All it needs to know is at 1 meter, where is it sharp? And at 4 meters, where is it sharp? And then also know how far the LiDAR camera is from the image plane. Once it knows those three things, it will always work, regardless whether you put a filter or like a adapter in front of your lens, or essentially an adapter behind the lens, because that's what a speed booster is. Can you use the Tilton Nucleus Nano 2 system with Focus Pro LiDAR at all? It would be annoying to have to buy an entirely new follow focus system. You have to, because the Tilta does not even communicate with the LiDAR. It doesn't know what the LiDAR is, doesn't take any measurements from it, or it's just a completely different system. So yeah, you have to. It's, basically, if you want to have a follow focus, a remote follow focus that gives you manual control, but also a LiDAR, so it gives you, basically allows you to use it with sort of like an AF system, then yeah, you have to buy this whole kit, unfortunately. Great, and thanks a bunch. Do you use autofocus professionally? All around me, manual focus pulling seems to be done less and less. Yeah, I do use it. I haven't used this on a professional job yet, but I even remember when I first got the Sony a7S III, and I used some of these nice autofocus lenses on the Sony. I remember there was a short film I shot in New York where we were on a gimbal, small crew, we just didn't have time to rehearse, and I was like, let me try this autofocus. It's supposed to be really good. And yeah, it locked in on the actor's eye, and we did 5-6 takes, something like that, and each time the focus was dead on. And after that, I was kind of convinced, oh man, I could see myself using this on a bigger job. Now, again, what's great about the DJI Focus Pro is that you can have that autofocus, and again, like I'm saying, you can have it be very accurate. It just depends how accurately you calibrated everything. Once everything's properly calibrated, it will work great. But of course, another advantage is the fact that you have this, the AMF, which is the auto manual focus, as they call it, which is amazing because it allows you to have autofocus, right, that you're relying on. So in a big production, you can have your AC, or your focus puller or whatever there on the side, watching a monitor or whatever, following you, and he can just have his hand on the grip and let the LiDAR do its thing. But if he notices that, something happened, maybe, I don't know, something got in front of the LiDAR and it screwed up the settings, well, he can be always holding this, and you'll literally essentially, when you're in AMF mode, when this thing is running and the LiDAR is autofocusing your lens, will actually correspond here. So you're going to feel this thing moving. So you can have your hand on it, and whenever you feel if you feel something goes weird, really far this way or that way, some kind of a quirky thing, which again, I haven't ever seen it do that, but let's say you were maybe in a setting where there's a lot of you have some raindrops, for example, in front of it. This might get disrupted because it's using a laser to measure the depth. So suddenly rain, for example, raindrops could create a problem. Well, in this case, you can, at any moment, you just simply hold on to this and don't let the focus go there or this way or that way. So you can think, and also at any moment, you can completely override it in another direction. Because again, it's this sort of a hybrid where you're relying on autofocus, but whenever you want to, you can just step in there and you can use, and basically correct it manually. So that is a sort of a, really big advantage. Now, when I used the autofocus, like I said, on that short film, which was the internal autofocus on the Sony a7S III, again, it worked great. I didn't have any issues there. But let's say if I did have some kind of something for some reason, made the autofocus kind of go a little bit crazy, well, then with internal autofocus, you don't really have a way of intercepting it, remotely and stopping it or overriding it. that's where the DJI Focus Pro, I would say, kind of stands above, the competition when it comes to the autofocus thing. So yeah, so there is no other autofocus system, and I'll tell you, whenever you're working on a big film, and I'm not talking about like short films that you're doing, or little indie projects that you're getting basically a basic salary and nothing. I'm talking about like these big films that had a chance to work on a few times, like $50 million and above, like 100-something million or whatever. At those kind of budgets, you have a dedicated camera crew department, and even whether you're working as a cinematographer or director, whatever, you're not going to be relying on autofocus, because you're at that basically at those budgets you can afford to hire and have somebody that's really, really freaking good, like the best in the industry, to pull the focus for you. And so, and they're going to do an amazing job, like, again, probably 90% of the time, which is pretty much as accurate maybe as this is, or more, 99% of the time as this is, or maybe even more. And so in that case, why would you be worrying and kind of finicky? So that's what I'm saying is could this be used in a big production? Yes, for sure it could, definitely, if they updated those cables, like I said. But is it going to be used? On indie projects, for sure. It just makes it, that, like I said, that much easier. Like sometimes you don't have the time on an indie project, right, to rehearse it with your AC to make sure that he's pulling the focus properly and things like that. Or maybe your actors aren't as well trained, and they're not hitting the marks properly and all that stuff. So that in that case, it's just, for the sake of time and ease of setup, which again makes it quicker, it's just so much nicer to have this and know that, again, 90% to 99% of the time, it's going to work. In those few, examples or cases where it doesn't, well, you can still have somebody as a backup kind of override it. So yeah, in my opinion, again, like I said, indie projects for sure, big productions, I think, because when I work on those big films, I mean, they can hire anybody they want. They'd rather just hire the best people than having to rely on new sort of untested technology. Now, again, if this goes through more iterations, updates, and it has, like I said, the functionality to add more marks, let's say with the hand grip, better cable connections and stuff, then I don't see why this would not be used on like those, again, the top of the line big budget productions. Hey Dom, nice review as usual with you. Thank you. No one is talking about this, but is it possible with this new DJI LiDAR to calibrate photo lenses manually, like Canon 24-70L, for example, which turns infinitely? No, if it's a pull, I mean, you could try it, but no, I mean, it would very quickly go out of the thing. Like, this LiDAR system needs to know where's the start and the stop of the focus pull, and if it's focused by wire, that just like this one that just keeps on turning and turning, well, it won't know where's the starting and the ending mark. So it's not going to work with that. That's why I say this is for manual lenses. If you want to use manual lenses but convert them sort of to autofocus, well, this is what the system is for. So if you own an RS3 Pro, do I need to purchase the LiDAR and focus motor? Yeah, whether you own the RS4 or 3 or 4, yes, you have to, like, if you want to use it in the configuration, which is what I have now, you do not need to get the whole kit. You do not need the side grip, because again, this is essentially now the grip in your gimbal. That's what it does. And if you don't want this, if you're not going to have an AC operating focus for you remotely, then all you do is you buy the motor or two motors if you're going to have a zoom lens, and then the LiDAR, and then that's it. Hello Tom, I have a question. Why is nobody using the DJI Focus Pro with a microphone on a camera? If the focusing motor that is so loud has captured, the microphone is unusable? No, I mean, here, I'll get this really close to my lav mic, and like literally all you're hearing right now is the actual, like, the motor makes, I don't think it makes any noise. It's the actual lens. So like if you have a lens that's a bit more noisy, then I guess then. Now again, most cases you're not going to be putting a mic like right up against the motor, or to your lens, I should say, because again, it's not the motor that's making the noise. Like you see at this kind of a distance, you're not going to hear anything. If you're going to put a shotgun mic on top of it, again, if it's a good shotgun mic, it's going to be more picking up, the sounds from the front of it. And again, if you have a lens that's not noisy, then no, this will not be an issue. Can I use Focus Pro with automatic focus lenses for better accuracy? No, yeah, it's strictly, again, like you say, it's strictly for manual lenses. Thanks for the video. What are your thoughts on the F6 Pro? Yeah, there's very little about it, and I mean, yeah, so far I love the camera. It's, I mean, in short, it has all the great things because it pretty much is like the original F6, you know, Z-Cam. It just has that Pro, meaning those Pro features like the monitor, slightly better control, the little doors for the media. Like, so it's basically little improvements here and there, but it's the same sensor, the same image quality, which is great. If you see my original review of the F6 Pro, I mean of the F6, not the Pro version. So most of the things will apply. It's just, again, it just has a few extra of those Pro features. Will this work with other monitors like HoloLens, Mars, or Atomos Ninja? If you're referring to the side grip, I mean, yes, you can connect, I guess, any monitor on it, but it's not going to have the pins here will not connect, so you're not going to have direct control. That's something I would say where if you want to have that live video feed and those extra, like the LiDAR settings that you see and the basic measurements, all that stuff on your monitor, then pretty much the only option you have is to get the DJI wireless monitor, which, I mean, it's going to be great for this, but then again, it is a little pricey and it's not the best monitor either, the wireless monitor. Like, it's got its own little quirks. So, you know, but again, if you want to use the LiDAR and have all of that, you know, telemetry data from the LiDAR embedded in your wireless monitor, then the DJI monitor is really the best way to go. Does the LiDAR have to be lined up to where the camera sensor is? Nope. Like I mentioned, you just have to measure the distance between the sensor and the front of the LiDAR. Does the unit have DJI app integration? As a Z-Cam user, you probably know how great the phone app is, and sometimes I use Z-Cam on my phone and DJI on an iPad when using the RS Gimbal. So I'm wondering if I can use the app with this. This would save me time from high bright monitor, as I could have an AC guy use the app while I'm operating the gimbal. Yeah, you can use their app to control certain functionality of the focus, but like, I'm not sure if you're asking if you're going to have a live video feed. No, you will not. But again, if you're using, for example, like the Sony A7S III, then you can use their app to wirelessly transmit video. So I guess you could just have, like you said, you have like two tablets or two mobile devices, and one would be to control the DJI Focus Pro, the other one to transmit the video. Oh, please do another video testing it in low light. I'm going to show you guys maybe actually a test here in this video. But so far in all of my tests, yeah, I mean, that's the big advantage of the LiDAR system versus like any in-camera autofocus system. Like with the Sony A7S III or with like the Canon C400, for example, or C70, you know, they all have a really amazing autofocus built into the cameras, except when it's in low light, because it still relies on, you know, what it's able to actually see. Well, that's where the LiDAR is really amazing, because once it finds the face, it just locks onto it, and then you can turn off all the lights and everything, and it will still follow the face really well. It makes no sense to move iris with a motor. Yes, it does make sense. If you're, again, it's not something you normally do, but if you're ever like on a film shoot where, like, let's say you're going from outdoors to indoor location and you have huge exposure difference, right? Let's say it's super bright outside, very dark inside, then yeah, you're gonna have to adjust the iris, and it happens on a lot of films. You'd be surprised. What if your lenses don't have gear wheels? Well, yeah, the kit actually comes with like little, you know, those little portable little gear rings that you can wrap around your lens. I have the Ronin 4D. Is this a direct upgrade module for the camera as well? No, I mean, this doesn't have a camera. It just has like a sort of a little camera there built in, just so it knows what to focus on. But otherwise, you're using your own camera. So the 4D, I mean, it has its own built-in gimbal and camera and stuff. So it's a completely different system. Do I need cinema lenses, or can I use with, say, a Canon EF mount photo lens? Again, you probably don't want to use it with photo lenses because they're, you know, focused by wire. You need manual lenses. But yeah, they can be Canon EF mount lenses, and photo lenses, you could say, but the older manual lenses. Oh, so now all those so-called cinematographers that were praising manual focus are leaning towards autofocus. How the wheels have turned. I mean, yeah, I guess, I don't know if you're making fun of people or not, but I'll be the first one to say, when the first autofocus systems came out, like, you know, like even like 10 years ago, I remember it was just not dependable. It was not something that you would, again, if you're shooting a big production where everybody's waiting and there's no, like, you know, especially if you're working with like these big stars where they're there for a limited time. It's not like you can just be like, oh, well, everything was great, but, you know, Mr. Cruz, we need to redo the whole scene because, you know, our autofocus system screwed up. Yeah, he's going to be like, well, what the hell are you doing? Relying on autofocus. They, you know, when the actors hit and then, like, get the performance right, they do not want to know that, oh, when you need to do that amazing performance that you just did and just redo it all as great as you did because you know, some technical problems. So you're really not going to rely on anything, whether it's, you know, autofocus, whether it's like lighting equipment or anything that's not like real field tested. And again, 10 years ago even, a lot of the autofocus stuff was just not reliable, not to the point where, again, where you could be like 90 or 99% certain that it's going to work. Now, big difference. Like I said, this works amazingly combined with the, you know, AMF setting where you can at any moment override it. So if you have a really good, you know, focus puller combining with this, yeah, I can see this being used on big films. Again, I would say probably first going to be used on their indie productions, which I've already seen being used on indie films. But the bigger projects, I think it's, you know, it's slowly going to change. But again, you got to understand that you're, you know, it just, you know, technology changes, it improves. So yeah, 10 years ago, I would not recommend, and I myself did not rely on autofocus. Even when doing like these YouTube videos, I would not rely on autofocus. And now, for like the last, I don't know how many years I've been shooting, even including this, everything's autofocus. Like, why would I hire now and pay somebody to just sit there and pull focus for me when I don't need to? It's, again, it's for a YouTube video, it's good enough. And even if like those few cases where the autofocus maybe didn't work perfectly, well, I can just either overlay some B-roll over that footage or just cut to something different, right? So again, technology, as it gets better, it's going to be used in more and more settings. So that's why cinematographers' opinions will change. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. And also, as always, you know, check out the original video that I did, the full in-depth video of the review of the DJI Focus Pro, if you want to see all the other cool functionality and tests and the good and bad things about it. But if you have any other questions, again, let me know in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them here. Or as always, you can reach out to me through my website at tomantosfilms.com. That's it for this one. I'll just see you guys in the next video. Bye.